on to your butts. It's Wilhelm Screamfest.
Hello and welcome to another Screamfest review. This is the fourth or fifth review of the month, and we have Paul here. I think you've been in every single Screamfest so far, so 5 years in a row. How you been doing?
Pretty good. Still day job is still not working, so I've been doing other creative projects in the meantime to try to stay sane. Otherwise, I think I'll go nuts. But other than that, I can't complain. Other people, it'd be messed up to complain when so many people are actually like struggling really hard financially and everything. So it's kind of like I'm not gonna, compared to most, if I'm grading on a curve, I'm doing pretty great. So yeah.
What are these creative avenues you're doing?
So, I've you know me, and you know that I've been a big fan of pro wrestling my entire life, and I've always wanted to do something involving that. I've worked for wrestling promotions, doing web design, photography, all that stuff for a few years. A lot of years. But I did a movie podcast for a while. You were on it a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided, why about a wrestling podcast? So it started off just being about like stories and very basic video. So I would record like this with someone over a webcam, and that's all it was. And we would just talk about their career and what they've done. And it's all indie wrestlers. It's not like, it's guys that grind on the independent scene, going wrestling in bingo halls and high schools all over the US, sometimes around the world. And then eventually we started incorporating a bunch of different video components to it, because we had all this footage of these guys wrestling that friends of mine have taped. And then also I can go on YouTube and scour for other footage to use. So then I started using that to do context. It's called Indy Handshake is the name, indyhandshake.com. And we talk about pro wrestling. So even if you go in and you don't know who the wrestler is, you get context with the video. You see what kind of wrestling style they have. If they tell a story, normally we include video of that story. So you kind of go in, even if you don't know the guy, I think you end up getting to know them by the end of it.
Yeah.
And we're going to be releasing a bunch of matches and stuff soon too. So we have a whole lot going on.
I mean, I've been to one indie match. It was for your birthday a few years ago, and that was pretty fun. I think I've only been to, two full. I've done like a pay-per-view for WWE, but besides that, nothing else. But they're fun.
Yeah, and indie wrestling's a weird place because like even a couple of those guys you saw like live in that little gym, like they've had like tryouts with WWE and WCW. Like they've wrestled big names. It's very strange the way indie wrestling works.
Yeah.
But I would also be remiss if I didn't mention my other project I'm doing with Cody Pasby. It's his project, really, but I'm on it. The moviemusicalpod.com, movie musical podcast, on a mission to cover every movie musical ever made. So, yeah.
How many have you done so far, you think?
Oh, shoot. I think 16, 17. I'm trying to think of how many episodes we've had. It's been a lot. We're doing Halloween stuff right now, so we already did 30. We've done 30.
Jesus.
They all run together. But right now we just did Rocky Horror Picture Show and Phantom of the Paradise, which very Cronenberg-esque, I would say. If Cronenberg were to make a musical, it would be very much like Phantom of the Paradise. It's a bananas musical filled with a lot of body horror stuff. So yeah.
Would you consider what is your criteria of a musical? Does it need to be like musical in the genre, or would you say that like Young Frankenstein could be a musical?
I think Cody has put the bar at like 5 songs.
Okay.
And for me, it's like if the songs are performed in the movie, or if the characters sing it and we don't really know they're supposed to be, like Les Miserables, they're not singing in the story, but it's a musical because they're all singing.
Yeah.
But also Sing Street we consider a musical, even though the characters are actually singing it in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me that's a musical. It's more to do with like the genre of like, is the music being used to tell the story? In which I would say if yes, then it's a musical.
Okay.
Yeah, as opposed to like like Wayne's World is not a musical, even though even though there are performances of music in it, they are tangential to what's actually happening in the story.
Mhm. Well, speaking of musicals, I would love to see a musical of this movie you're about to review. We
Yes.
can maybe try and brainstorm that towards the end, but we're reviewing Scanners. This is the first time I've seen Scanners ever. Looking at Cronenberg's his filmography, I think this is only my second movie I've seen of his.
Cronenberg's nuts, man. He has a lot of I love Cronenberg because he's so, like, when he has an idea, he goes all in on it. Like, he's like, I have this specific vision and I'm going to go for it no matter how crazy it is, but he wants to make it as gory as possible and uses imaginative ways to do, which we'll get into with this movie especially.
Yeah. Yeah, like, so I guess we'll just jump right into it. So, Scanners, it's about people with telekinetic powers, and but not just that, like, I feel like it's kind of more of a modern take on like telekinesis. Like, oh, it's a company doing it. It's not just like, or there's companies involved. It's not just people. They just wake up and they're like a superhero or something.
Yeah,
Um,
almost like, really, it's interesting that you mentioned that because it's almost very similar to what like The Boys is doing now with the superhero genre. Yeah,
yeah.
like the corporatization of of powers.
Like, I wonder if the boys kind of took from there, or they just it. I don't know if they're like a fan of it or.
I'm sure because probably the comic book writers originally probably had this and a few other things in mind, because yeah, Cronenberg he's one of those guys that I feel like that not a lot of people talk about his work, but his work, especially by more well-known artists. It's like when Anvil came out with that documentary and Metallica was like, this is our favorite band. They influenced everything about us, but people didn't really pay attention to Anvil, but they paid attention to Metallica. I feel like that's Cronenberg.
Mhm.
Like, the mainstream doesn't pay attention to Cronenberg, but they pay attention to the people that he influenced.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, I think we kind of talked about that. I did a review with Mark Riley on The Fly, and we said like, yeah, no one really talks about these movies, maybe besides The Fly, just because Jeff Goldblum's in it and it's such an iconic like gore movie. But besides that, I don't really hear people talking about these besides like hardcore film people. I Okay, right off the bat, only thing I've known about this movie is the one scene where a head goes like,
Yeah.
I was waiting for it the whole time. I was like, and then I was a little disappointed that it was in the beginning. I was like, man, now, but at the same time, I was like, you know what? Originally,
Originally, it was even earlier.
it was supposed to be
It
like
was
the
like-
opening scene.
Like the opening scene.
I loved the effects of it though. Like, it's so 80s, but like for a split second, you're like, wait, how did they do that? Like, the head didn't look. It didn't look like Terminator 2 when Arnold Schwarzenegger's walking down the hallway and you could tell it's a dummy just getting shot at. Like, it was so quick, the edit, so you didn't have enough time to like really look at it.
Did you look in on how they made it?
No.
So they put together like a bunch of different pieces of like latex and everything from, basically they had like a bucket of used like makeup effects parts, and they put that as part of the composition so that when it blew apart, like chunks would fly everywhere, They also put like if there was like discarded hamburgers that people had not finished eating, they threw that in there too. They were just like anything that can go in there. But then they kept like making all these explosion techniques and they didn't like the way it worked. So eventually the head prop guy or the effects guy, I forgot his name. Eventually he just got a shotgun and he said everyone has to get down. And everyone got down and he aimed the shotgun at the fake head and he blasted it. And that's how they made the effect. They straight up shot a fake head.
Like, the only thing that my mind goes to is like Gallagher with like watermelons or like
Yeah.
in the pilot of Chappelle's Show when they remove his hood, Clayton Bigsby, and like the guy's head goes like, it's something stupid like that. But I love. Okay, that's cool. That, I mean, because I didn't have the Blu-ray or anything, so I couldn't see the special features. I'm sure it's on YouTube, but I'll look at that after because I love special effects.
Extremely low budget, and then if there's one thing that's cheap in America, it's ammunition. So
Yeah. I believe this is a Canadian film.
Mm-hmm.
Canadian science fiction. Which you could tell because the main actor towards the end, like I really noticed his accent coming out. I was like, "But what about that?" I'm like, "Oh, yep, this is
Yeah.
Canadian." And by the way,
That guy,
am I wrong for saying he looks like a clone
Ben
almost?
Mendelsohn?
Yes.
Yes. I was about to say this, like literally the exact same time you were about to say it. I was about to say, does he look like Ben Mendelsohn? If they do a remake, Ben Mendelsohn.
I'm like, his lips need to be just a little bit more like wet and gross because like, I feel like in every one of his movies it's like that.
He's got that little like drawl that he has that, where like you said, where he's more like pursed.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like this movie. It was fun going on. Like it felt like an 80s movie where like you had to put your mindset of not seeing the spectacle. It's a story, but there's some fun stuff along the way. I think my favorite aspect though, not just the special effects, is like the use of telekinesis. Like there's so many different ways. Like someone could push someone could put someone on fire, someone's head explodes. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I love that in that way is that we're first introduced to it by, I believe the first scene is him in the mall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're first introduced to it like the two extremes, because the first scene is him not really knowing what he's doing. Everyone's kind of confused. What just happened? We're all a little confused. Imagine this, you're watching this for the first time. You had no idea about the head explosions. Imagine you're watching this for the first time in 1981 or whatever it is. And you're like, what is happening right now? What is this? And then in the next scene that we get it's with Ironside's character, and he's like a master at it.
Yeah.
So he's like, and he goes up there and he's like playing the game. He's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll volunteer. What do I need to do? Like, and he's acting like he has no idea what's going on. And instead, like, he's like a master of his power. So he like goes and explodes the brain and all that stuff. So we get the two opposite ends of the spectrum, like right in the beginning. We're like, okay, we have the person who's new to this, doesn't understand it, and the person that completely is in control of it. And I like that they start off that way, because now we're kind of like, okay, we have very clear parameters of the two options here. Like it could either be something that kind of annoys someone and bugs them and hurts them but doesn't kill them, and then we have straight up blowing your mind. So
Yeah.
I like that they introduce it like that.
It makes sense because like for the viewers first time watching it, they're like, okay, this is the pinnacle of how you can go, and this guy's a noob, like he just makes someone fall, go so it's cool seeing the difference and then just dropping it along the way. I feel like a lot of movies do that now. Like you'll see someone with a little bit of power and then like the big, and then it goes back and you see their evolution going. What was I gonna say next? Let me make my notes.
And then we slowly get the backstory of the villain after that. We don't get it in the beginning. We get both of them, and then we see their journey like simultaneously, even though one of them happened way back in the past.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting way to format the movie.
Would you say that Michael Ironside has ever been a good guy in a movie?
Oh, I don't think so.
Like he
just looks like a bad guy.
From like Free Willy to what was that recent one? The like Apocalypse.
Oh, Turbo Kid?
Yeah, Turbo Kid. Like every one of his movies, he's like, you just hate him just looking at him. Like you did something wrong, or you're about to do something evil. You're not good. I think not just the music, but the sound effects they use when they use telekinesis is really cool. Like it's just like, it's as if AOL exists in the 80s and it was you're trying to connect to the internet, like do 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 do, and then like static and distortion. They probably just got a bunch of weird, not even like musical synth machines, but like the heartbeat sensors and stuff like that, and just like recorded everything and mixed it all in. I thought that was the best way to really show, I guess, the power in a way, as far as an audio sense. Like I wouldn't know what I would have done if I was given this project, like, okay, make a sound. Like I would just put screams or something. I wouldn't even have thought to do synth.
Yeah, it reminds me of kind of the partnership that Zimmer and Christopher Nolan have, where they're like, we need to make this scene tense. We need to make the audience feel uncomfortable. And he kind of has that weird ambient like synth in a way that like, especially like an Interstellar, he does it a lot. And Inception, where you're kind of like, it makes you uncomfortable. It makes you feel like it puts you on edge. And they do a really good job of doing that in here. I know it's, you know, I'm assuming if you were to ask them, they'd probably say that something like this is a big influence in the way they do that. Cause yeah, it's definitely unsettling when you hear it, especially because I got like a nice little subwoofer here in the viewing room, and yeah, it was booming. I love it.
The faces though, sometimes like I just have to laugh, especially towards the end. Like you can totally put certain music over this and change the whole feel of the scene. Like the eyes are rolling back, but I like that it's like you. Even though it could be cheesy at times, you can kind of see what they're doing, like with their power. It's not like South Park where they're like,
yeah,
like, like I think that's really cool that they're showcasing it through their face, and it's not just like they're looking and the music is going. Like it just adds. So, I don't know. I feel like if they did this today, the movie might not. They would have to change a lot, like because people would be like, "That's cheesy" or something. Looking up, I saw, well, this was 2017. Someone got the film right or the rights for it to do a TV series, but who knows if that's ever gonna happen.
Yeah, I don't know, especially if they did it like in the style of like Legion. Like if they did it in that style, I think I could see it.
Would you rather see this as a TV show or a reboot?
Oh, if I was gonna see it, yeah, as a reboot, I'd rather see it as a TV show. I feel like the story itself, like there's a lot of world building you could do with it. So for me, a TV show, because I feel like a movie is just gonna, you know, what was the one they just did? Oh shoot, it's escaping my mind now. Where the Flatliners. They just did a remake of Flatliners and it wasn't good. Because the original is like a cult classic. Like to me, like it's really hard to remake a cult classic. You can't.
Yeah.
You know, it's a little more difficult because a lot of the things that you're trying to improve upon are the things that make it a cult classic. You know, if you didn't have Michael Ironside's crazy white eyes at the end of this movie, you know, would it be as because the scene you remember see there's certain pictures you remember seeing the exploding head, and you see Michael Ironside with his white eyes like freaking out towards the end of the movie. Those are like the classic scenes you remember. So for me, yeah, a TV show would be a much better use of time.
I feel like they would try and do too much in a movie as well. So like they could, the first episode, maybe the beginning they'll show something, and at the very end, like they could show Michael Ironside's character. But I think it would work. It would be cool if this was like someone was maybe like they were trying to get into Hollywood or something, or they're trying to get into politics, and they could just use like, and then the big head explosion could be at a debate. Like that would just be. Just picturing that now. Imagine if that happened at one of the debates.
I wonder which one you're thinking about.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Both sides have their pros and cons.
Yeah, very fine. Head explosions on both sides.
No, but I think like if you add some big stake, like if it was on a stage that big, whether it's debate or a concert or something, I feel like as a TV show, it could work really well because the head explosion only happens like in front of people that probably sign NDAs, so they can't really tell anyone.
Well, so what they would probably do is if they did a TV show of this, and let's say they do it like a Netflix style or something, and it's only like 10 episodes, right? Because TV shows that go 20-something episodes, I'm sorry, looking at you, Walking Dead, it starts to get annoying. So that would probably be what they do at the end of the first season. So like the whole season would be building up to it, and all of a sudden, the end of the first season, boom! Now it's in the public eye, and now it's like, what are they going to do second season? How is this going to change things?
Yeah.
So yeah, that actually lends itself to starting pretty narrow. Oh, let's write this, dude. Let's let's write this right now. You know?
I think I would maybe even write this as like a limited series. Like, if we did, it would just be 20 episodes or 2 seasons. Like,
yeah,
I don't think this would work as a long elongated. I mean, most shows go too long anyway. Like,
yeah,
Parks and Rec ended maybe 1 season too long, but it still wasn't bad.
I'd still say it was good. I think they ended pretty right.
I can't remember. There's one show that ended that was like Schitt's Creek. That's a perfect example. What was it? 6 seasons?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 6 or 7 is good. When you get past 10, like unless you're an animated show, it's not gonna really work. Like
And even
Simpsons
then,
and
many
South Park
people would
can do.
argue it. Many people would argue The Simpsons should have ended around season 10 anyway. So
Well, now apparently it's Simpson forever, so whatever that is, I don't even know. But we're tangenting now. Let's get to the end of this review part. Out of 5 stars, what would you give this movie? Just based off a movie, not a horror movie, not a cult classic, just a movie in general.
I still give it like 4 stars out of 5 because I feel like there's a lot of inventive ideas, and you really got to look at. I can't separate the context of this is 1981. At
Mhm.
this point, it's either like there's very few gritty like sci-fi-ish horror stuff. There's only like sprinkled around here and there. So for that, I think this movie is really inventive. It comes up with a lot of great ideas, and it's constrained by a budget that is so low. Like I don't know if you noticed, I'm sure you did. Every time they're not in a small room, the lines are dubbed and they're off.
Yeah, I kind of thought, okay, this is the 80s, like where the audio is just off a little bit, but it did sound very tin candy, and it was like,
So
hello.
every piece of dialogue that isn't in like a small single room had to be redubbed in ADR, and they basically had no budget. So they were kind of like probably like one take and being like, it's good enough, keep going. So that's why every time they're in a public space or they're in a room with like a lot of people, they had to redo the audio,
Hmm.
and it's bad. It's bad. But I still think the movie's inventive enough, and there's the great reveal of they're brothers and that's their father, all that stuff. I still feel like it's still a really good movie with a lot of great ideas, and yeah, I love it. I love this movie.
Yeah, this is definitely a movie. It's not like, oh, you spoiled it. Like, we spoil here anyway, so if you're offended, oh well. This
You've also had
movie,
basically 30 like 40 years to see this movie,
yeah,
so
but like movies like this, it's not really like the plot in this point it's the plot is major, but the reveal isn't like, oh my god, it's the overall story that really matters. um yeah, thinking it is hard to like separate it from the 80s and low budget as a film. um I think I would just give it 4 stars. I really like the movie. I mean, I'm a sucker for gore when it's done right, and most 80s movies, they really, I don't know, they really do a good job. I feel like there's a lot more like yellow acidy like type of effects in the 80s than now. Everything's just red, just explosion on screen. Like, I don't care. Give me something I haven't
Here.
seen. Give me something that's make me go like, ooh, like
Yeah.
I'm not desensitized, but I need something different. Like, you need to break the boundary, not just do something that everyone else has done. Um,
You
I mean,
also have to
Michael,
know, if you haven't seen this now, especially anyone watching or listening to this, if you haven't seen this movie, you have to remember that this movie was being basically filmed in the like 1980, aka 1979. It still has that pacing of like the late 70s where there's a lot of really long takes, a lot of moments where nobody's talking. And so your brain might not be conditioned to that sort of pacing in a film, especially if
Mhm.
you go from like watching a modern horror movie to watching this. It's so you kind of have to like it. Definitely in the beginning of the movie, my brain had to like retrain a little bit rewatching this movie. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, this movie's paced like this. And in 15 minutes, I was kind of like, okay, this is how the movie's paced. But in the beginning, it does throw you off when you're not used to it.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this before. This is not in a snobby way, but going into movies, if you want to really appreciate them, you kind of have a sense of like, not education of a film, but just know different mindsets of different genres and different years that they came out. Because if you only watch movies, if you only watch like Fast and Furious movies, and you don't watch anything old, like say you watch this movie, you're like, what? Why is this so slow? Like, there's guns and stuff, but like, you gotta think this is a certain director. They're doing this. This might not be what you like, but you kind of have to like put yourself like into the movie to really understand it. I feel like it's really important for this movie too. Like, it's a lot different than today's movies. Um, I mean, we're done with the review, but I want to go back to this Scanners musical. How would this work? Would it just be like they would be singing as like their head is being like scanned? Like,
Well, now that I've seen Evil Dead the musical, I kind of think, you know what, you could do pretty much anything. That's where my little foam chainsaw's from, Evil Dead the musical. Uh, yeah, and you got to play with the, you can blow my mind, stuff like that. You can just do a lot of I don't know. There's a lot of really tongue in cheek because musicals in general are tongue in cheek as it is. And especially when they throw like horror into it, you get like the Sweeney Todds of the world or the Evil Dead musical. You can really have a lot of fun with stuff like this. I don't know. I watched an entire A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. It's an entire musical about a guy killing members of a rich family so that he can get inheritance. So, and it's like a comedy. It's a farce. So, to me, musicals, you could do anything. So, yeah, I'd watch a musical of Scanners. Absolutely.
yeah, we actually were talking about musicals in my film class this last week, and I chose Sweeney Todd, and I realized like this is a lot different because it's not they don't stop and like project like when people think of musical like, oh, where they're just singing and like it's kind of a fantasy world. Like it's still the very real world except for one scene. So I feel like you could do the same thing here, but just keep it more not monotone, but not as like Broadway-ish. So I feel like the Sweeney Todd way version could work for this movie. I would love to see anything as a musical, just like for the sheer bananas and craziness of it. Especially this one. This would be like, how would they do the effect? Like, would they just have like confetti come out?
Well, you didn't see Evil Dead with us, right?
No.
Yeah. So there's the first few rows are like splash zones. So they have like plastic tarps you could lift up because they're basically like spraying blood like throughout the musical.
That's awesome. Is that, I mean, I'm sure it's not touring right now, but was it touring before like the pandemic still?
I think it was just about to come back to San Jose, or it had just come back. It had a San Jose run and a Vegas run, and I believe Chicago. But yeah, it's been pretty successful. Like a lot of the shows were either sold out or close to sold out pretty much every time. So yeah,
Nice.
it's a really good musical.
I mean, that's just the splash zone alone. I'm like, want to see it. I love shows like, I mean, Splash Zone for Waterworlds for obvious reasons, but with blood, that's like a horror fan's dream right there.
Yeah, and the good thing is they use like really watered down ones, so it doesn't get like too sticky, which is good because otherwise you'd be like, I can't deal. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a fun review, fun movie to watch. I highly recommend this to anyone, especially if you love 80s movies. It's a very different thing. It's not a slasher movie. It's a sci-fi movie that like the 80s isn't known just for slashers, but weird sci-fi. I don't know. I feel like the 80s is just a blend of everything before and evolving into something new. I don't know. It's just
and a higher profile, stuff like Alien, The Thing. It's like they decide to mix sci-fi in with the horror genre, and then especially like another like if you like this movie, like I love like Dark City is another great movie that predecessor to The Matrix, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff that The Matrix kind of borrowed from there. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that.
Let's plug your podcast one more time right before we end.
Yeah, if you go to moviemusicalpod.com or just look up That's Podcasting. That's my movie musical podcast I do with Cody Pasby. And I also do Indy Handshake. You can look that up. INDY, not IE. Or you can go to indyhandshake.com and you'll see my stuff. Or you can just go to my website, paulponte.com. It should all be there, along with my photography, music, all that stuff that I've been, like I said, many hobbies to keep sane.
I mean, now's the perfect time for everyone to be doing podcasts, but I feel like it's not just the podcast industry, but everything is changing because of the pandemic. Like I'm seeing people doing shows like on YouTube, even if it's not a podcast, just a show. Like now they can get more guests because people are used to, okay, now we'll send you a camera and then we'll do it from your living room or your bedroom. Like I think it's going to change a lot. We're going to have less even when things are totally back to normal, we're gonna have less like, okay, you need to come to the studio to do stuff. Like maybe if it's a special thing, but like, I mean, I'm moving now, so we're gonna be a lot further apart, but we can still be doing these podcasts this way. I don't know. It's a weird evolution, but we're getting used to it. Go check out Paul's stuff. I haven't listened to any of them yet, but I've been wanting to get into the wrestling stuff. I don't watch wrestling anymore, but it is interesting. Like the only wrestling stuff I've watched was the Darker Side of the Ring, the Vice. But I like, not just because it's Chris Benoit, like someone I know, but learning about like a wrestler, because that's a really hard life. People think it's fake, and it's such a hard life. Like people need to respect. It's just like, I feel like people need to respect stunt performers. Like they need Oscars. They need, like, it's a hard life just because you're not doing something like as far as a non-scripted thing, or you're not acting. Like it's still acting. It's not just acting. It's physical talent. It's so many things, and I would say go check it out. I will too. And I don't know if we did a review again, or well, not a review again, but if what movie would you recommend for someone if they like Scanners? One movie.
I would suggest pretty much anything on Cronenberg's list. One really good one is, it's really nuts. It kind of has the VR stuff really early, and it's from 1999 called Existenz. It's with a Z at the end. That movie's bananas. It's super low budget, but like way ahead of its time. He has The Good Crash. There's two movies called Crash. One of them won an Oscar. That one sucks. His movie Crash is about people having sex around automobile accidents, and it's the only way they could get turned on. Bananas movie. Really great. Also, you mentioned The Fly, which you already reviewed. That's a classic. I think everyone knows to watch The Fly. But also, even the movies, if you think about it this way, in 81, he made Scanners. But then think about this. In the 2000s, he made Eastern Promises and A History of Violence, two movies which are not sci-fi, which are not horror, but they're both excellent films. This dude's a really amazing filmmaker, and someone that is only talked about in like very nerdy movie circles. But I feel like he's such a good filmmaker that anything he does, I think, is at least a look. And even if it's something that's kind of not your bag, or you might not maybe like it as much as we do, I feel like you'll still find something to appreciate in the movie. He takes big swings, and I always say, if a movie takes a big swing and misses, I appreciate that more than the guy that bunts it and gets on base. Like I love it better when somebody actually goes for it and even if he fails, he went for it, man.
There you go. So if you like Scanners, go look up all those movies. Make sure to look
Dark City.
Dark City.
Make
sure to check out That's Podcasting, and also Indy Handshake. And until then, thank you, Paul, for being on.
Thank you for having me on.
We'll do this again next year for sure, and we'll do some stuff throughout the year before next Halloween. I really need to do more things than just October. But for all you watching, listening, wherever you are, thank you, and we'll see you next time.